Alright, what is up guys, my name is SheaNorse and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today I'm back with another Roblox Tutorials with SheaNorse video. And in today's Roblox Tutorials with SheaNorse video, what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be showing you guys how to make thumbnails very similar to mine, which is going to be pretty awesome, and I hope you guys like and enjoy this tutorial because it's basically going to go through exactly how I make my thumbnails and how you guys can replicate them at your own pace and with your own designs and your own kind of stuff. A lot of people have been recommending this from me, so I decided, hey, you know what, I want to make a video on all of this. I want to show you guys how I do this kind of stuff. So without further ado, I don't really want to talk about much what we're going to be doing. We're just going to go through it as we go, because usually I like to explain at the beginning of the video what we're going to do, but in this case, since I need to put a little bit less editing in my videos now because of how busy I am with school and stuff like that, I'm just going to go through the whole thing, make it as easy as possible, and hopefully we can have a beautiful thumbnail at the end of this video without any complications. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to go to our preset details here, and you're just going to name your file whatever you want. In this case, I'm going to name mine, I don't know, something like Shea. Oh my god, I can't even type. We're going to make the width of this one 1920 and the height 1080. Make sure you have those presets, and if you have those presets set up to be completely ready. Oh wait, actually no, this is the wrong presets we have here. The right one is supposed to be 1980 by 1080. So make sure you have that. For some reason I thought it was 920 by 1080, but that's not right. Okay, post-production Shea here. I just really wanted to quickly correct something that probably would have been really fatal if you guys actually followed. The correct aspect ratio for this instance here is not 1980 by 1080. It's actually supposed to be 1920 by 1080. I'm not sure why I got that wrong, and I'm not sure why I thought 1920 by 1080 was wrong, but again, I'm sorry for that mistake. Just make sure you don't make it, okay? Moving on. Resolution doesn't matter. I usually set it to 300. Make sure that your background contents are set to transparent. You don't really have to modify anything else. Make sure that this is set to pixels, and press create, and as you can see, we now have our beautiful thumbnail. Well, it's not really done, but yeah, we have our beautiful template for a thumbnail. So the next step to making our thumbnail is the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to use a render for this thumbnail. Now, I already have a prepared render for this video specifically, which I'm just going to get really quickly. So it's basically this one right here, and I'm just going to put it in and press check so that it now becomes a smart object. Now, personally, I don't want this render to be a smart object, and if you guys want to learn how to make your own renders and to fool around with rendering, I do have two tutorials, one on making beginner renders, and I will be making one in the future that will also be going through the main essentials of creating awesome renders for your games and stuff. But either way, games, why did I say games? I'm very tired, guys. I'm sorry. So I'm just going to take my time quickly to shade this whole render for you guys, so I'm just going to do that really quickly. Alright, so as you can see, I roughly shaded and kind of brightened up this render. Now, I would normally put a little bit more effort with something like this, but normally I just kind of do it kind of rough like this when it comes to making thumbnails. Of course, yeah, if you want to shade your own renders, I will actually be making a video that goes into detail about this much better than my previous one, so stay tuned for that. But either way, I'm pretty happy with the results here. I think it looks pretty good for the sake of it being in a thumbnail, so I'm just going to quickly convert this into a smart object and then rasterize the layer so that it merges all of the layers and then it creates it into a normal layer once again. Now, in this case, I'm just going to size this however big I wish. So in this case, I'm just going to size it kind of like that. I'm not sure why I rotated a little bit there. We're just going to assume that that looks all right. I mean, I could totally change the position of it as time goes on. But for now, we're just going to leave this right there. So now that we have our render done, we're actually going to create our new layer. And we're actually, first of all, we're just going to call this render so that we know that this is the render for the thumbnail. Next up, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go all the way down here. And normally, this tool right here, if you see this in your toolbar right here, if you're using Photoshop, this would normally be what is called the gradient tool. So even though the gradient tool is nice, what we actually want to use is we want to use our paint bucket tool so that we can fill in this layer. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill in a layer of a color of choice that we want to be in the background of this thumbnail. In this case, I'm just going to use, for a first example, I'm just going to use a darker blue. Now, I recommend that you use darker colors because later on when we're actually like adding all of the layers and stuff to the thumbnail, if you have a light color, it's going to be hard to, you know, tell the difference between your render and the background. Or I don't know how to explain it yet. We'll just go along as we go. But in this example, I'm going to be using a nice blue. And if you want to change the color, if you're not satisfied with this color, you can just right click, go to blending options, click on color overlay, and make sure blending mode is set to normal and the opacity is 100. And you can just set it to any color. In this case, for now, I just want to use a nice darker bluish, kind of bluishy cyan color. I don't know how you would explain it. Sort of like that. Now, of course, this doesn't look good. You would probably, if you saw something like this, you'd probably be like, SheaNorse, that doesn't look very nice. Well, don't worry, okay? We are just selecting the color. So once we have selected the color, we're actually going to move all the way to Google Chrome or whatever browser you use. So once you're on your local browser here, as you can see, this is from one of my other videos that may or may not be uploaded yet. Once you're on your browser, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be searching up our first part of this. So as you can see, we have a bunch of beautiful links here revealing all of my personal information as always. But the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to search up what I call a texture. So textures can be anything. So in this case, I'll show you an example of a texture that I would normally use. Usually what I like to do for my thumbnails is search up free texture, and then I look at all of these textures, and you could just scroll through them, look at them, choose which one you like, and you can actually add it to your thumbnail. But in the case of this video, we're actually going to search Galaxy and press enter. And personally, I found that Galaxy textures look really good in thumbnails. So we're actually just going to, we're going to copy this image and we're going to come back to Photoshop. Again, you could just use any texture. Any texture will work doing this. Just keep that in mind. It's not this texture. You do not need this texture. You could choose anything. Like you could choose this if you wanted to. Personally, I don't like the look of that. I usually like really contrasty textures, and what I mean by contrasty is there's lots of blacks and whites that are like very different from each other. Not like this one. You can see how there's lots of bright colors. I like it so that there's lots of dark and bright colors mixed together. Either way, we're just gonna hop back to Photoshop for our next step. All right, so once you've got your you've got your image, what we're gonna do is make a new layer, and we're gonna press Control V. And as you can see, when we do that, we are able to resize our beautiful looking texture. Now, I recommend you hold Shift when you scale things, because if you don't, then it's gonna look kind of like this. So while holding Shift, you can kind of scale it. I'm just gonna undo that because I don't like that. Also, if you don't know how to scale things up in Photoshop, all you have to do is make sure that show transform tools or controls is on, and then you could just click on any of these edges and it will allow you to transform this beautiful looking image, and you could just press check whenever you feel like it's good. So I think that this is a nice scale here. So the next step to making this look good is we're actually going to go up here to our top bar, and we're going to go to image adjustments and make sure that you have this layer selected, image adjustments, black and white, and then we're just going to press OK. And then once we have this done, we're going to go up to this little thing, make sure you have this layer selected only, and we're going to change this to overlay. And as you can see, what happens here is this texture, the black and white texture that we've converted from color to black and white, is now an overlay layer on this thumbnail. As you can see, now we can actually change the opacity, like if you want it barely anything, or if you want it lots, you could just change that. And we can also change the colors as much as we wish. We can make it red, pink, I don't know, purple, blue, cyan, teal. Personally, I want a nice blue, kind of like that. Press OK. And once you have your texture the exact way you want, of course you can modify it as much as you wish. We're gonna go to the next step to creating this amazing thumbnail. All right, so we're back on the web here, and the next thing that we're going to search is actually for a pattern for a thumbnail. Now, I recommend that when you're searching patterns, for example, I'm gonna search something like stripes because I use a lot of stripes in my thumbnails. If you go to images, you can see that there are many colors. I recommend that if you're using a pattern, I recommend that you use black and white patterns. So you can see how this one is black and white. I don't recommend using yellow patterns, but I mean, you could just do whatever you want. The problem is that if you have lighter colors, like for example, a lighter red and a darker red, the pattern will not show on the thumbnail as much as, you know, something with black and whites would. In this case, I'm not going to explain that too much, but for the case of this thumbnail, I think I want to try something a little bit different. So I'm just going to search pattern, and as you can see, when we search pattern, we've got a whole bunch of patterns that we can choose from. In this case, I kind of want something a little bit like, not that, because again, we're looking for black and white patterns. What's this? Maybe this might look good. I'm not quite sure. We could choose any pattern we want, like literally. I mostly use stripes, but for this case, I don't know. Let's just try this out and see how it goes. All right, so now that we're back in Photoshop, same thing as before, new layer, and paste right in there. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna size it and rotate it as much as we want. Usually what I like to do with my textures is rotate them a little bit. Then we're going to go to this little thing again. You do not need to change this into black and white unless it has colors in it. In this case, we do not need to change it to black and white because it is already black and white. We're going to change this to overlay, and as you can see how it goes into the texture and the color. Now, I highly recommend that you turn your opacity down, especially for something like this. Like, for example, I don't know, something like this would look a little bit nice. I don't know. Let's just press check on that one. And as you can see, we now have a beautiful looking render with a beautiful looking background. Okay, so the next step to creating our thumbnails is we're going to make sure that we have a few things here, because this part is the trickiest. Now, you don't need to do this, but I highly recommend you do it if you want to add more depth, because at the moment, our thumbnail seems to look a little bit flat. I mean, yes, the texture's cool. Yes, the background's cool, but it still looks flat. And what I mean by flat is, you know, if we make this render invisible, there's no brightness and there's no darkness. It's only just flat and one color, flat. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, I kind of sound funny saying flat either way. But what I want to do to make this thumbnail look a little bit better is what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we have a few things here. First of all, make sure you go to window and you have properties selected or checked, whichever one works. Next up, make sure that you have the adjustments window open as well. So this thing right here, make sure that is checked so that you have this beautiful window here. You should have the properties and the adjustments windows, and these are what they look like. So of course you can check and bring in any windows you want, but yeah, I definitely recommend for this part properties and adjustments. And what we're going to do is on our adjustments layer, what we're going to do is we're going to create a brightness and contrast adjustment, and we're going to create one of these. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the brightness to, I think, about however much you want. Like for example, in this case, whatever, however much brightness it takes to make this picture bright. So in this case, if we had 20, I mean, it's nice. It's a little bit brighter, but it's not as bright. Usually I like to set my values to around 80 and in the 90s because these textures will definitely interfere with the way light works, especially these filters. So in this case, we're just going to set it to about 90, and then we're going to go to this little thing right here, and we're going to click invert. Now we're going to create a second one of these, do the same thing, except this time we're going to make it dark, go to masks, press invert. Now we're going to select our brush tool, and we're just going to size it up by select the size and change it like that. In this case, I'm going to adjust them automatically, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to make sure that our brush is selected at the color white, because if it's black, nothing's going to happen. So we're going to make sure that the color is white, and we're just going to slowly but surely color through all of this here. And we can modify these things as well by going back to this parameter here and making it darker. Then we can add some beautiful, beautiful brightness on top of the picture. In this case, I want it a bit brighter, kind of like that. I think the darkness is a little bit too much, so I'll just make that a little bit less. And as you can see, our thumbnail isn't as flat as it was before. But as you can see, now that all of this is done, we're still not done our thumbnail. The next step to creating your thumbnail is actually kind of easy now. So now that we have all of these things done, all of these layers, we're just going to name them. So this one is going to be called color. Whoopsie, we'll just leave it like that. Texture, and this one is pattern. Then we have our darkness. Damn, I can't even spell, whatever. Light. There we go. So now that we have all of these layers, we are now going to group them into one big layer, and the way we're going to do that is by selecting all of the layers. We're going to drag them into this little folder thing, and that's going to create a group. We're going to name this group background, something like that. And now that we have our background completely done here, the next step to creating this thumbnail is we're going to add some text. Now, I do have a tutorial on how to create some pretty epic text. So if you guys haven't already watched that, make sure you watch that, because I'm just going to speed through this, because I mean, even though I'd love to teach you guys how to make text, I already have a video out for that. So I'm just going to quickly speed through this as I make my beautiful looking text for this beautiful looking thumbnail. Anyways, I think this text looks pretty epic the way it is. I'm just going to adjust it a little bit. As you can see, looks pretty epic. Of course, I would adjust a few things here real quickly. For example, make the stroke a little bit bigger. Now, I didn't necessarily layer it too much because, of course, I'm a bit lazy sometimes with my thumbnails. And yet, this still looks pretty cool in my opinion, I think. I mean, when you zoom out, if you saw a thumbnail like that, you would probably be impressed, right? Or maybe you wouldn't. I don't know. Either way, now that we have the text done, we're actually going to go to the render and add a stroke to it. And we're just going to make the stroke a little bit smaller and add a drop shadow to it. Unselect the use global light. We can select the angle as well. I'm just going to make it something a little bit like that. Turn down the opacity. That way the render is separated from the thumbnail, and we don't have to worry about it being attached to the thumbnail. Now that all of this is done, I think this looks pretty nice. I mean, I like the outcome of this, but there's one more thing that we need to do to make this a SheaNorse thumbnail. And that is to add one more layer, and this layer is going to be our outer stroke layer, which is going to be on the outside of this thumbnail, like all of my other thumbnails. So the way I do this is by going to our paintbrush tool and painting in there, and then I go to the fill. Instead of the opacity, make sure you go to the fill, set the fill to 0%, right click, blending options, and then I go to not inner shadow. I go to stroke, change the position to inside, and then make it somewhat big, kind of like, I think that looks good. Change the blending mode to overlay so that it makes the outer layer nice and bright and colorful. Opacity is usually set to 100%. Then I go to inner shadow, and then with inner shadow, what I do is I set the size to something nice and big, make the choke nice and big so that it looks, you can see it a little bit more. And then we can also adjust the opacity, whether we want more opacity or not. Of course, you could do this to your own according. Honestly, I don't know what your guys' thumbnails are and what they look like and what colors you're using. So then again, it's good to play around with these settings, but for now, I think that this looks really epic. Like this is as epic as a thumbnail can be epic, just like my thumbnails. I think the text needs to be a little bit centered. Yeah, I think that looks great. Either way, guys, that is how you make a SheaNorse thumbnail. And you know what? I like the text there. Yeah, that works better. That is how you make a SheaNorse thumbnail. So the very last step to doing all of this is to actually save this whole thing here. We're gonna call it SheaNorse thumbnail or whatever. I don't know. Press save as PNG in thumbnails and press OK, and you should be done. Either way, I hope you guys learned a lot from this tutorial. Again, a lot of people really wanted me to make a tutorial on this for some reason. I will be making a bunch more tutorials as the days go by. For example, I'm thinking of doing a tutorial on how to do epic art on paint.net, similar to the stuff I do on Photoshop, so that people can do stuff like me but for free. Either way, I'm pretty happy with this result. I think it looks pretty epic, in my opinion. Like if you take away all the layers, wow, look at that. Look at how beautiful of a background that is itself. But either way, thank you guys so much for tuning in for this video. I hope you guys learned something. Make sure to smash the like button and subscribe and join me for some free Robux giveaway. And yeah, see you guys later. Peace out.